you kind of touched on revamping the property. So I'm curious how, I would guess, now correct me if I'm wrong, someone like Mountain Cabin would have to, or versus a beach house in Miami, Florida, they may have to revamp at different time periods. One may be 5 years, one could be 7, or whatever the time period is. Well, what is a revamp? What does that look like?
Well, it's a couple things. So one, you've got just regular maintenance that properties have to have.
Right.
The harsher the elements, the more maintenance you have. You might have a property in the mountains that has different seasons, and you have snow and you have summer and heat and everything else, and those big shifts in temperatures. That takes its toll on properties and systems and things like that. So you're saying, okay, I might have to, my lifespan on my heating and cooling system might be only 6 years in this environment, where in a more a more stable type of environment you might get 10 or 15 years, right? So you're looking at saying, what does that cost if I have a property on the salt in those areas that are on the ocean? Salt does you can see a property that has, if it has any metal, it's all rusted out and it looks like it hasn't been looked at for 15 years, and those metal hinges are only a year old because of the salt, right? It's a harsh environment on certain systems and certain materials. And so you take that into consideration first. We do that in the underwriting. You're going to look and say, hey, listen, how much of a maintenance reserve do I have? When it comes to an actual overhaul, if you're doing it correctly, and I'm assuming, let's say, like in my opinion, like having that, this immersive experience right out of the gate, and you're really dialing it in, and you're not having to go in and revamp that, right? So
you put the work in on the front
end. If you miss
end
on that, you're going to have to do that as soon as you recognize you missed, right?
Right.
Let's assume we did all that right. We got our immersive experience. We've got all the custom artwork. We've got the design the way that we want it, and it's working. Well, there's wear and tear on properties. Right. And there's people in and out of them. And depending on your property, if it's a very high occupancy property, you're probably, like, let's say you're in a market that averages 80% occupancy. You're probably doing a revamp maybe every 5 years-ish, 4 to 5 years.
Okay.
On a high occupancy type of property. You might be in a market that a very good property is operating at less than 50% occupancy. Now you're stretching that maybe 5 to 7 years before you have to do any sort of revamp, because you're going to have to eventually freshen these properties up. New rugs, new couches, new case goods. Maybe the artwork still works. Maybe the immersive experience and design overall still works. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe maybe the market's changed a little bit, and we're like, hey, we're going to go do something different. And so usually it's going to be somewhere in that 4 to 7 year period. And the sliding scale is a lot of times going to be determined based on your occupancy. Right. A property that's getting 80% occupancy is going to have, twice the usage over a given period of time as a property at 40% occupancy. Right. Okay. And so that's why I always tell people, I'm not always trying to chase the highest occupancy. I want the highest total dollar amount, which is a factor of occupancy and nightly rates, but I will try to push my nightly rates higher and my occupancy down so that I'm maximizing a lower occupancy and a higher nightly rate, because I know that if I can stretch getting a return on that furniture for another year or two, that's a big deal, right? And so, and people a lot of times don't take that into account when they're thinking, okay, what are some of these things that are going to get run down? That happens. Those things are going to get used and need to be replaced, and they're going to get damaged. And over a certain period of time, all your furniture is going to need to have a turnover. And a lot of times it's somewhere in that 4 to 7 year period, and it's determined based on occupancy typically.
Okay. That's really interesting about the occupancy and the nightly rate. That makes total sense to me. When it comes to, say they did all the work on the front end and they did a really good job at the front end, 6 years later, they go, it's time to revamp it. Is there a kind of somewhat general rule of thumb, 10,000 to 50,000 range? Or is there like any kind, or it just goes, no, it just kind of depends on where you're at?
Yeah, it's, so the general rule of thumb for us is based on price per square foot.
Okay.
And so we're looking at it, not assuming we have a lot of capital expenses on the property, meaning we don't need to do any construction remodel stuff, right? That can be different area by area. To remodel a kitchen, it might be $80 a foot in some areas, and it might be $120 a foot in another area, right? And so there's price per square foot for remodels, and there's price per square foot that we look at for furnishings, fixtures, artwork, that kind of stuff. Right. And so those things, we have a pretty dialed in price per square foot that we look at. And if we're starting from scratch, we're usually going to budget around $40 a foot. If I have to go put all new furniture in, all new artwork, all the accessories that go along with that, I'm going to budget around $40 a foot.
$40.
And then if I'm going to do any sort of capital expenses, remodel expenses, any systems that need to be replaced, all that's going to be on top of that. But if I'm looking at just I'm going to start over from scratch, or I'm going to go into a brand new property, that's where it's going to be.
Okay. All right.